Hi, I'm Jay. Thank you so much for being here. Welcome back to my channel. I received a lot of questions, even more questions after my original Soft White Underbelly interview, and a lot of them were about post-traumatic growth and how I developed the resilience to keep moving forward and what I did afterward to give myself a more stable and grounded life. So I decided to take some time and kind of break down my process and put it into a structure to make it easier to listen to and hopefully use. I do want to clarify that I am not a mental health specialist. I'm also not a licensed psychologist of any kind. This is drawing from my own experiences and my own therapy. A little bit of it comes from somatic therapy, a little bit of it comes from polyvagal theory, and those kind of things. So today I want you to use your own discernment and decide what works for you. Leave the rest. No harm, no foul. I'm not here to tell anyone how to live their lives. I'm just here to tell you how I lived mine and what worked for me. So thank you so much. And today I want to talk about what I think is the first brick in the foundation to being able to have that post-traumatic growth and to become a person who is living a life that actually works for them. I don't want you to be stuck in these downward spirals. I don't want you to lose another minute to what happened to you in the past. If it happened to you in childhood, it's probably part of your baseline. It's probably a huge part of your character, but you don't have to be fully identified with it. And I think the first step to kind of breaking free from, and I'm not saying that anybody here is completely identified with their trauma. We're all complex human beings. There's a lot of different moving parts to us, literally, physically, emotionally, mentally, spiritually, if that is something that you connect with. And this is just how I do things. So going to the main topic, what I personally consider the very first most important tool to being able to move on through your post-traumatic growth is discernment. Because without a healthy discernment, you don't know what your boundaries are. You don't know how to stick up for yourself. You don't know what's for you and for someone else, and it's really, really tough to build solid self-respect if you can't determine and discern for yourself what is okay in your life and what you will not allow. You cannot develop boundaries if you don't have a solid sense of discernment. And I personally consider developing your discernment to be the highest priority if you're trying to change your life. Another reason for this is because there are so many systems that will, if you can't determine what is good in your life, you might wind up in a place that you don't want to be. You might wind up, if you don't want to be in the military, you might get taken by the military, or you might be susceptible to an influence that's not to your ultimate benefit. You might wind up under the influence of somebody, and this is something that vulnerable people who have gone through trauma are more susceptible to. Because when your conditioning and your base training is to live in chaos and to live under someone else's misuse of power, you're subconsciously going to seek that out. Your body's going to look for environments where it feels at home, even if at home is dangerous. And until you're able to develop that discernment to decide what you actually want your home to be, you might wind up in a terrible place with the wrong people in the wrong crowds. I definitely did that. I spent a lot of time in the wrong crowds, and even worse, you might be re-victimized if you're unable to determine and to discern who's okay to be in your circle or even near your body. Especially if you've grown up in a traumatic household, you might have been taught to fawn or to freeze or to fight. All these survival instincts, they tend to override the long-term goals, because when you're trying to survive, you really can only get past that moment, and there's not a lot of space to be able to think forward long-term, because your immediate your immediate need is to get out of danger. And what do we do when we're in danger? You know, fight, flight, fawn, freeze, all those things. I think if you found me through Soft White Underbelly, I think most of us are pretty familiar at this point with these terms. Thank you to the people who did all that research and put it out into the world. Shout out Dr. Gabor, Maté, and many others. I think another way to think about discernment is to think of it as a way to stop outsourcing your truth. Because chances are, if you have wound up in a relationship with a narcissist or a sociopath, cluster B symptoms, anybody who lives in a reality that is not objective, if you are in a situation with a person who is constantly manipulating what reality is and how the things around you and them are going to function in according to this manufactured reality, you're going to need some strong clarity. And discernment is that clarity. Tanya, the woman who gave birth to me, she's incredibly charming. Like many abusers are incredibly charming. And I think the mistake that people make is that they trust themselves to spot a liar. And the truth is, if you're able to spot a liar, it's probably because that liar is not that great of a liar. And I'm not saying that your ability is non-existent. What I'm saying is that if you've been traumatized, your ability is probably being filtered through a traumatic filter. And your inner being might be trying to grasp onto unhealthy people and unhealthy things. And so in order to recalibrate your ability to have clarity and to be able to hold on to what is actually true and what is going to help you, you need to be able to stop yourself, look at a situation, and ask serious questions. The questions that I ask myself when I'm trying to figure out what the heck is going on and what is actually real, usually I'll start with, who does this benefit? Who is the person or system benefiting from this moment, decision, or action, or interpretation of reality? Who stands to win or to gain something in this moment, right? Because if you're the one that's constantly losing or giving or rolling over, and somebody else is constantly taking and gaining and winning, there's an imbalance there that needs to be corrected. So those questions are good. And then you want to start to think about, you want to make observations over time. Is what's happening a pattern? Has it happened more than once? What excuses are being made by them, by you, by the people around you? And, evaluate it. Determine what it is that's actually being gained from that moment. If you're dealing with a narcissist, are they taking your energy? Do you feel drained and tired? Too tired, perhaps, to have a clear mind and make better decisions? Too tired to keep your own energy happy and alive so that you can make, if you need to fight another day, or if you need to be able to concentrate at work or your education, right? Because you need your energy. That's for you. That's not for other people. Your energy is for you to be able to enjoy this beautiful life. And it's very rare that someone else can make your life and your mind and your heart beautiful. That is something that you have to do for yourself. Try to make it a nice place, That is one place that if you have a strong sense of discernment, all that noise cannot get in. Narcissists are no longer a threat. Manipulation is no longer a threat. If you're still walking into a grocery store and buying things that you didn't initially plan to buy, if you can't make a list and stick to it, those are all forms of discernment and decision making and boundary holding. And all of those things build on each other. And if this all sounds really basic, I'm not trying to insult anybody. Like I said, this is just what I had to go through and determine for myself to be able to get through the hard things that I got through in life. So another thing to consider is the flip side of not having discernment, or who is trying to mess with your ability to have good discernment. Because that's how you're going to spot your manipulators, whether it's a system, an institution, or a single person. If somebody is doing something to cause you to question yourself and it's not a healthy discourse, you're not just having, you're not exchanging ideas and thoughts. If somebody is influencing you or attempting to influence you in a way that makes it hard for you to think clearly, whether they're depriving you of sleep or insulting something you thought was great about yourself, or just generally speaking down to you or speaking down about you in front of other people, there's all different ways, many different tactics that abusers use to break our ability to have clear discernment. In my case, starvation, constant pressure, constant insulting, there's a lot of different things. Physical beatings can also wear you down. Anything that takes your energy and makes it hard for you to concentrate is attacking your discernment. And there's a reason for that. I think something that a lot of people forget is that abusers are really smart. They're very intelligent. They're doing what they're doing on purpose. There is a point, sure, people can have a terrible background and they can repeat patterns from the past. That is not an excuse for abuse, period. Okay, so keep that in mind. There's a difference between good intentions, well-meaning people who make mistakes, but things that are not mistakes are beatings, insults, manipulation, maliciousness, any kind of assault, any sexual abuse. None of those things are excusable, and it doesn't matter what the reason is behind it. So that is why you need your discernment to help keep you in line, and it's also why you need to pay attention if somebody is doing something to cause you to have a less clear mind. Also, if you're struggling with addiction issues, that is something that is stealing your ability to have a clear mind. We all need buffers. We all need ways to keep ourselves safe and sane from the outside world. Those buffers don't have to be drugs. I was an addict for a long time. Many people in my life can attest to that. For a while, I was high functioning. I actually had a roommate when I started my cocaine habit, and she never knew. And I was going hard, but there is a time that you need to stop doing those things. There comes a time when you're risking your actual life, and that's not acceptable. Okay, we want you to be here. You were born for a reason. If you're somebody who believes we only get one life, or if you're somebody who believes in reincarnation, either way, you don't want to waste your time, and you don't want any more of this precious life that you have to be wasted on the past. Okay? I understand that the pain and the memories and the influences are going to be there at some level, for a good amount of time, but like I said, you don't have to let it be your identity, and you don't have to let it make your choices for you. I'm going to give you a diving analogy on how to think about discernment and how you can kind of build your way there. So when you first go diving, first scuba diving, we'll keep it on scuba for now, you have the option of taking a discovery dive, or the first level, the first certification is open water. And that is your basic dive. It's just, I think it's 40 feet in most places that you can go down. And, when you're first starting, even if you're confident in the water, generally your focus is on learning the right gear, learning your basic skills, learning how to put on your wetsuit properly, and the basics of breathing underwater, right? All of those things are self-focused. You're not really seeing what the other people are doing as much. You're less aware of your surroundings because your main goal in that moment is to be focused on just getting it right in that moment. Just focus on your breathing, learning how to kick properly, So you can relate that to the survival level, because when you're in survival, you're still very self-focused because you don't have the energy or the resources to be able to think outside of it, because all of your energy is going to learning how to use the gear and just function in that moment, right? And then as you progress, you keep diving, you start getting into habits, your muscles start to memorize how to move and how to put on your gear, and it takes less and less thought over time, right? Because it's becoming a pattern. And because your mind is able to put some of those things on autopilot, you're actually freeing up more space to be able to have a little more awareness of your environment, have a little more awareness of what the people around you are doing. You're less focused on just breathing and surviving the moment, and you have a little more free space to actually take in what's around you. You might spot more sea animals. You might swim up on a turtle, So that's kind of how you start to build your awareness. And the next step after that awareness is actual discernment. You can start in diving, you can get your advanced open water, and what that is going to give you is a deeper understanding of how you're moving within the water itself. It'll give you a deeper understanding of how your gear works, why it works. You can start making your own decisions on what kind of gear you actually want to use. Same in life. When you have that discernment, you start to see the patterns. You start, at first it's really tough. It takes a lot of focus, but then over time it becomes new, healthier patterns that you can start to recognize, and you can start to kind of guide a little more yourself. You need less hand holding, and less energy is spent on that. So I hope that's a good analogy. If it's not perfect, that's fine. So if you have more questions or points or topics that you want to bring up in relation to developing discernment, or how you've done that for yourself already, let me know where you are in your post-traumatic growth. Are you still in the survival stage? Are you still spiraling? Or have you kind of gained that sense of awareness, and now you're kind of seeking direction on where you want to go, because maybe you've gone to 12-step or therapy, or maybe you've entered some kind of situation that's might not be enough for you. For me, I needed several sources of therapy, several. And I think a multifaceted approach and taking that into our own hands is one of the best ways to be able to move forward. You never want to put all your eggs in one basket, right? So the same goes for your recovery. So how can we nurture our clarity of mind and that precious discernment that we need? Another way is to move your body. Get up, okay? Get up and move around. And it doesn't even have to be anything crazy. For me, if I feel a panic attack or a flashback or some anxiety coming on, I know that if I move my body and get those endorphins flowing, I've got something in me that's going to fight back. And sometimes if I'm feeling very nervous, I will actually drop down and start doing push-ups, and I try to force myself to do at least 10. And that it not only does it refocus my mind, it gets my blood flowing, it clears my mind, and it gets that energy out. A lot of times anxiety, especially in traumatized people, is not actually anxiety. A lot of times it's a totally different emotion, but because you've been so drenched in chaos and trauma, your brain is filtering it through that negative lens. So moving your body is a really good way to get that static energy flowing and out of your mind so that you can have a clear mind. That is just one of the many ways to support having a clear mind, on top of, limiting or completely quitting any kind of drug use or alcoholism, especially if that's something that you don't have control over. Yeah, and if you can kind of do it regularly, I have figured out that if I want to have some kind of routine to help stabilize myself and to help offload some of the decisions throughout the day, because I want to use my mind efficiently, right? I want my energy for myself. I want my clear mind so that I can make good decisions. And another way that I do that is by having little routines. I'm not a person who's great with a daily routine, but I found out that I work on a 3-day cycle, okay? So for me, I do something every 3 days, and that helps kind of support my own personal ecosystem on how I work. So, start paying attention to your habits. Find out what your personal cycle is. Don't worry about what other people are doing. I know not everyone has the luxury of control over their time. I think for people who are going through traumatic times or afterwards, I think if you can find a way to control your time, it will be highly beneficial to your growth. I'm not going to give suggestions on how to do that. That's up for you to decide. Try not to shoot yourself down immediately. Be open-minded. This is a creative community, okay? And then over time, that discernment is gonna become discipline. And I think one of the greatest lessons that I learned is that discipline isn't really like an act of force, right? It's an act of love. It's one of the best ways to respect yourself. And it doesn't have to mean harsh habits. It doesn't have to be difficult. Pick things that work for you. So for me, one of my routines, I like to stack things. So actually, before I record videos like this and I want to have a clear mind, I always take my dog for a walk. And I kind of knock out a couple of my to-do list things. I try to pick 3 to 5 things a day to get done. And I knock off a couple things in the morning. You know, I make sure that my attention is not being pulled away by my dogs or by my chores or things like that, so that I can be here and focus with you. What I hope that you gain from these talks with me is a sense of self-leadership. I'm not here to tell you what to do. Be responsible and reasonable with yourself, okay? Because, like I said, this is a channel for radical self-support, self-leadership. You know, we want to be in control of ourselves. We don't want other outside influences taking our power or our energy or our clarity. So use your discernment on me. Decide if this is helpful to you or not. That's all for today. I want to thank you for being here so very much. Let me know how this video experience was for you. I do want this to be a cooperative experience where we learn and work together through these things. I'm not here to save anybody's life. I'm not here to give legal or psychological advice. I'm here to invite you into my personal process of post-traumatic growth. And let me know if this is helpful to you, and also just let me know what else you want to talk about. Otherwise, I'm just going to keep moving through the structure that I've already created. Once again, thank you so much for being here. My name is Jay.